Hi there everybody and welcome. My name's Rob from the Rotherham Cycle Hub.
And I'm Jamie from the Barnsley Active Travel Hub.
And in this episode number 5, we're going to be running you through a few safety checks and a few maintenance tips on your pedals, your cranks, your chain rings and your bottom bracket there. So over to Jamie to talk you through.
All right, we'll start off by having a quick look at the important issues surrounding pedals and safety on the bike. Obviously, if you buy a new bike, it may come without pedals, so you'll need to install them. It's very easy to cross-thread the pedals when you're threading them in, so do exercise caution when doing that. Otherwise, once your pedals are already installed and you want to check that they are sufficiently tight, the most common tool that you may use is a 15mm spanner. So you just want to check that they're on there tight and they're not going to come loose while you're riding. Again, it is a big safety feature with pedals because that's one of the contact points you have with the bike, so you need to make sure that remains secure. There are obviously a couple of different types of pedals, mainly flat pedals, like on this side of the pedal, which is good for wearing all footwear. But be aware there are more specialised pedals, such as on this side, where you need special shoes and clip-ins if you haven't seen those before. I'm also going to quickly talk through a little bit about the cranks and the chain set on the bike. There are so many different types of chain set and crank that we could do a whole series on these, but I'm just going to talk through this one, which is the most common type of crank that you'll get on bikes. So on this type of crank set, the crank is connected to the bike via a spindle and bearing that runs through the frame called the bottom bracket. All you really need to check with this is that the crank is tight onto that spindle. So again, most commonly it's an 8mm Allen key. Check that that's nice and tight. Bear in mind, this is probably the tightest bolt that you will see on a bicycle. It needs to be around 40 Newton meters, which is really tight, so really give it some when you're tightening this up. The other common fitment to this crank is a 14mm hex, so you may need a different type of socket to an Allen key to tighten this up. Basically, you want to make sure both cranks are tight. There's no play when you're moving them from side to side. Again, we could feature a lot more on cranks, but we're just talking about the safety issues of making sure they're on and they're tight. Perhaps we'll review more issues surrounding this in a later episode. But I'll just pass you back on to Rob now, and Rob will talk about some other things in the episode.
Just going to run you through a few checks you can do on your chain rings and your bottom brackets. So your chain rings are the parts of your gears that feature here. That's where all your power goes through, all your force is kind of concentrated when you're pedaling. There's not really a whole lot you can do kind of like physically to check they're okay, but one of the things you can do is like a visual inspection. So your chain ring is made up of teeth. One way you can see if they're starting to wear is the teeth go from having more of a triangular profile to becoming what we call a bit more like shark tooth. So they kind of get a bit curved and a bit more kind of pointy like that. So if you have a look around, if the teeth are getting very pointy and particularly like finned, that's normally a sign that your chain rings are quite worn. You'll also might notice things like if your chain is getting sucked back up by the chain ring, that can be a sign it's worn as well. Another key thing to look out for as well is that these chain rings should be nice and flat. So if you're pedaling and it's wavy, it's all Pringle shaped, that's not good. That's going to be problematic, and that's the time where you need to change it and get a new one. So with your chain rings, it's mainly just a visual inspection. With your bottom bracket, you can be a bit more hands-on with this. So the bottom bracket is the bearings that run through the frame and connect each side of your cranks together. And that means you can pedal nice and freely. So how we want to check for this is we want to see if there's any play anywhere. The best way to do it is to grab onto your cranks and give them a good rock side to side. You want to try and hold the bike as still as possible, so you can just try and really feel if there's any kind of movement going on down here side to side. Any movement in there is a sign that it's worn and needs replacing. You may also hear or feel, it might become very stiff, the pedal. It may also sound quite gritty and grindy, and that can be a sign that your bottom bracket's worn and needs looking at. And that's a kind of a bike shop job. So any of these things here, if you do notice something that you don't feel right or looks out of place, it's time to get your bike down to a bike shop and get a professional to have a look at it.